You'll never catch me, Krabs. Not when I shift into maximum overdrive.
Oh boy. Well, would you look at that? Disney has farted out another live-action remake, and what do you know? It has all the appeal of a freshly laid Vindaloo turd.
This is a serious crisis. A catastrophe!
The original Pinocchio is actually one of my favourite Disney films. It came out all the way back in 1940, which was when the golden age of animation was really starting to take off, and is actually Disney's second animated movie to release after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White is a fine enough film, but being the first animated film to ever release, it was obvious that Disney hadn't quite polished its technique yet. Pinocchio was a film that made a lot of technical improvements. We had the multi-pane camera, which gave backgrounds more depth, smeared glass being put in front of the camera to mimic underwater effects, not to mention how detailed the backgrounds were, and how gorgeous the animation was. To this day, I still absolutely love the animation that's used for the Monstro chase scene. And although the story can be questionable at times, I absolutely loved the overall much darker tone. It felt like a film that Disney was putting all the effort in to improve itself upon the first, both in a technical and creative aspect. And then we have this. Yet another soulless remake which has just been churned out the Disney machine for the sake of making some easy revenue, with subpar animation, watered down moments from the first, and some changed moments which are just so absurd. And man, you know something is bad when the critics and audience on Rotten Tomatoes actually agree on something. So let's pour ourselves a big old glass of root beer as we take an in-depth look at Pinocchio 2022.
When you wish upon a star.
Alright, so first off, let's take a look at the animation and character designs. Now in terms of the world itself, I actually think overall it looks pretty good. Geppetto's house in particular has a lot of little details which try to capture the look of the original, even with some of the clocks we see in the background. I also do think it's quite funny how we still have the spanking clock from the original, but now it has a police officer interjecting. Though on first glance I actually thought he was joining in. There are also a bunch of clocks with other references to past Disney works. I think these would have been fine if they had just stayed as background shots. You know, something that you could pause on the screen and just squint at and be like, oh yeah, that movie, yeah, I remember that. But the film actually goes a little further than that and just shows them up close on camera. I don't know, it just felt a little too on the nose for me. I also quite like the Pleasure Island design. Obviously they had to do a little bit of redesign as I don't think the red-faced Indians would fly so well today. But I did like the black and yellow theme with the creepy clown faces. Though some parts of it felt a little far-fetched, like the Mountain of Candy, which felt like something from Wreck-It Ralph. And there's also other aspects of it which were a bit dumb, but I'll talk about that more in the story section. Alright, character designs. I quite like the look of Tom Hanks playing the role of Geppetto. He does a serviceable job with the character, though his accent in the film does vary quite a bit.
Don't understand, do they, Cleo? My clocks, they mean everything to me. Look at you! Look at you! You are an almost real boy!
One opportunity I think they missed though, would have been to have his character shout this line.
You are a toy!
I also don't hate the Jiminy Cricket design. At least they tried to make him look a little bit more like a cricket, as he didn't really look like much of anything in the original. Though I must say, I can't unsee the fact that his head now just looks like a Brussels sprout. The guy voicing Jiminy seems to do an okay impression of the character from the original, though whenever Jiminy has to shout, it's almost as though you can hear his voice beginning to break.
Shut my mouth, you can talk!
The fox and the cat also look pretty good when compared to the other CGI characters, as the level of detail on them seems much higher than the rest of the characters. Then we have Figaro, who I'm going to say doesn't look so great. In the original, with the hand-drawn animation, Figaro is an expressive character. Here though, they seem to be struggling to find the balance on making him expressive, but also try to keep it realistic at the same time. Honestly, at this point, I think they could have just used an actual cat. At least then it'd be more convincing when Geppetto actually starts interacting with him. And this might just be me speculating, But it felt like the film kind of knew this too, as it feels like some reaction shots of Figaro were cut. Such as this scene here with Geppetto talking to Figaro. It felt like there should have been a shot with Figaro reacting to this question, as that's how it is in the original, but it just cuts to another angle of Geppetto.
In one, so we should make a wish, huh?
I don't know, maybe nothing was cut from that, but it just looks a little clunky. Cleo, I get why they'd want to use CG for, as you can't really get much expression out of a standard goldfish, but her design here just feels a little bit weird. With the pouty lips, it just looks a little oddly suggestive, and I wouldn't be surprised if Geppetto got weak in times of his loneliness.
I'm sorry!
Cleo.
I get they were trying to mimic the 2D style, but it comes across as less of the 1940s Cleo and more of the freaky designs from Shark Tale. Pinocchio, I think for the most part looks fine. They definitely captured the overall image of the original, but the flat 2D style eyes just don't quite do it. They look bad, especially on moments when the camera zooms in on Pinocchio's face. Nope, I know you're humming the song to try and get me emotional. It's not working. I'm just too distracted. Nope, don't make him cry. It only draws more attention to his shit face. Okay, so what about the Blue Fairies design? Yeah, that's pretty spot on. Alright, no, I'm actually gonna talk about this. It's probably gonna get me some angry opinions in the comment section, but fuck it. Okay, so in the remake, where they've clearly gone to a lot of effort to capture the design and aesthetics of the original, it does seem a bit of a weird choice to radically alter one of the characters' appearance. Now, I see a lot of people arguing that Disney is doing this just to be woke and it's just trying to force diversity, but I honestly don't think that's the reason. See, let's be real. Disney doesn't give a fuck about diversity. Disney doesn't give a fuck about minorities. Disney only cares about business. And randomly race swapping a character is a great way to drive up business. Because for better or for worse, it gets a lot of people talking about your product. Here's an example from the official Pinocchio Facebook page. Here we will see 3 images that were posted on the same day at the exact same time. First we have Geppetto creating Pinocchio. 400 reacts, 9 comments. Okay. Next one, a close-up of Pinocchio himself. Nearly 7,000 reacts, 250 comments. Alright, that's getting better. But now here's the final image. 72,000 reacts and 24,000 comments. And you can argue that it's not all positive reacts, and a quick glance at the comments will confirm that, but it doesn't matter. Because the more people that interact with your post, the more that it will get shared along social media. The marketing at Disney are well aware of this, and they will purposely put images out to bait these kind of responses. Unless, of course, the market isn't seen as profitable. Yeah, of course we at Disney support the LGTV community. Now go and consume some product. Homosexuals. No, of course we don't want any of those in our movies. Besides, they replaced the original Stromboli with a white person, so I guess it all balances out, right? So anyway, back to the animation. Yeah, it's not great. There are many moments you can see they're trying to replicate the animation of the original, but it just falls flat. Oftentimes you're looking at the CG and thinking, yeah, it does look a little shit. Obviously this isn't helped by the fact that the CG needs to interact with real people at times, and it just isn't convincing. It's kind of like the issue I had with the 2016 BFG film, where the interactions between the live action and the CGI just didn't look very good, and it probably would have been better just to have the full thing in CG. Unfortunately, this bad animation also takes away a lot of the more impactful scenes from the film. The donkey transformation scene, for example, arguably is the scene that most people think of when you mention the original Pinocchio, and there's good reason for that. It's utterly horrifying. The animation with the hands turning into hooves, the frantic music and the donkey thrashing around as he cries for his mama, it's stuff that's straight out of a horror film. Here they do their best to imitate the scene, but the CG used for the donkey's head is just so distractingly bad. Plus, I don't think the kids' acting is all that great either.
Somebody help me!
cross! Help! Help! Somebody help! I've been framed! Help!
And finally is the design of Monstro. What the fuck is with Monstro's design? In the original, he was just a regular whale living in the sea. Sure, there were some creative liberties with his design, like how he bared a set of shark-like teeth, which whales in real life have layers of thin strands like a comb. But come on, tentacles? What the fuck? Okay, so apparently in this film they do specifically refer to him as a sea monster.
Yes, Father, but it wasn't a whale. It was a sea monster, and we got out.
But why, oh god, did you give him that really dumb laugh as he's chasing Pinocchio? Like, come on. Monstro was never really a bad guy. He was just a whale in the sea that was hunting to feed himself. And the only reason he particularly goes after Pinocchio and Geppetto is because they pissed him off. He goes from a terrifying threat to a goofy villain. In fact, his laugh kind of reminds me of Bowser from the Mario parties. Yeah, so this film suffers with what I'm going to call the Marvel effect, where every scene feels like it needs to insert a random joke or a random quip, with a lot of them not making sense in the world, and just coming across as quite forced and lame.
Grab this! Oh, I just hit my boy of wood with a piece of wood.
See, despite being a darker entry, the original Pinocchio actually had a lot of jokes too, but they were more visual-based jokes which not only feel less forced, but can also age better over time. A lot of the jokes in the new Pinocchio aren't even relevant to what's happening, and are more just meta jokes that the film kind of winks and nudges at the audience.
We need a simple, strong stage name. I've got it. Chris Pine!
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Nah, it'd never work.
Of course, I'm just a talking cricket, so I'm not one to pass judgment on what's real.
Like, why is Jiminy admitting that a talking cricket is out of the ordinary? Do no other crickets in this world talk? How did Jiminy come to talk? Other animals seem to be talking just fine. Why is a talking cricket weird in a world consisting of giant walking cats and foxes? But what's even weirder is when the film opens up, we have future Jiminy narrating to us about the story of Pinocchio, which is what happens in the original, but he also starts interacting with the past Jiminy in the story.
Well, who are you? I'm you, only older and wiser. Really? How'd you figure?
Considering this is made such a big deal in the opening scene, you'd think this interaction would continue throughout the film, but no, it never happens again. But what gets weirder is that partway through, past Jiminy is now the one who starts narrating the story.
And so, Pinocchio became part of Geppetto's little family.
What?
And
Did the film forget its opening or something? I thought this was meant to be future Jiminy telling the story. Which now brings me on to the final and most painful section. So for the most part of the new Pinocchio, they do follow the same story beats as the original. But they did try adding in some new scenes and new characters, with varying results. Now, credit where credit is due, one of the main issues I had with the original Pinocchio is how the blue fairy is used as a lazy plot device for the story. Pinocchio and Jiminy are trapped in a cage with no way out. It's fine, the blue fairy will free them. Pinocchio and Jiminy have no idea where Geppetto is. It's fine, the blue fairy will tell them. Even though earlier she said that she couldn't help them anymore.
Very well. But this is the last time I can help you.
So that was a fucking lie.
And to be fair, in the new film they do try to mitigate this issue with the introduction of new characters, such as the seagull they meet at the beginning who now tells them where Geppetto went. But honestly, with the new film, considering Geppetto hasn't even been eaten by Monstro yet, you could just have him put a note on the door which says something like, "Dear customers, I have set up shop to go looking for my son who I believe is on Pleasure Island. Not sure when I'll be back. Geppetto." Then Pinocchio and Jiminy would go out looking for him, and it'd play out exactly the same. And then we have another new character, who is a young girl who works on Stromboli's puppet act. She befriends Pinocchio, and Pinocchio develops this weird kind of romance with the puppet she operates. Yeah, don't ask. She kind of has this thing going on where she wants to be a dancer, but has a crippled leg or something. I don't know. I thought the whole reason to introduce this character was to have her break Pinocchio out the cage instead of the fairy, but she doesn't. In fact, once Pinocchio and Jiminy escape Stromboli, she then disappears for the rest of the film until near the end, where we get some dialogue that Stromboli was arrested off screen, and now she's running the puppet show? Cool, I guess, but why did this pointless subplot have to exist? Surely it wasn't for padding time, as the original was already an hour and a half long. But having just explained how I appreciated the film trying to remove some of the plot conveniences from the original, I find it baffling that they then went and added in ones that were even worse. When Jiminy is trapped under the jar from the fox earlier, by pure convenience Stromboli's puppet show happens to be going right by him, and by even more convenience, it just happens to kick up a stone, which just happens to knock directly into the glass jar.
How convenient.
Later on, after Pinocchio has escaped Stromboli, by pure convenience they happen to run by the cart which is taking all the kids to Pleasure Island, which in pure convenience, the people on the cart just also happen to have a net ready to swoop Pinocchio up off the streets. And finally, when Pinocchio is about to go out and find Geppetto, by pure convenience, Stromboli's puppet show just happens to pass by, and this is done just so we can get closure for the random subplot, informing us that she's now running the show. Like, obviously the writers were aware that the plot convenience was one of the issues with the original, so why did you go and rewrite some back in? It just feels a little bit conflicting. Speaking of conflicting... Yeah, so another thing with this remake is that the morals of the film seem very conflicting. One thing they tried doing was to make Pinocchio more sympathetic with his actions. See, in the original, Pinocchio goes straight along with the fox and the cat. In this version, however, Pinocchio actually listens to Jiminy and decides to go to school instead. But he gets kicked out of school and is mocked by the other children, and only then decides that he wants to pursue a life of fortune and fame. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I get where Pinocchio is coming from. Sure, in the original, Pinocchio is a bit of a dumbass, but he gets punished for it. That's the whole point. Well, here it's like, what was he supposed to do? He couldn't go to school. Also, it's weird how the school isn't freaked out by a walking, talking puppet, but then again, there's a giant fox and cat roaming the streets and no one seems to bat an eye at that. The whole moral of it's bad to lie is kind of turned on its head, as Pinocchio uses his lying to reach the key and set himself free. So I guess the moral is that it's okay to lie just so long as you get what you want? I think that the writers may have taken a bit of inspiration from Shrek 2 with this scene. Pleasure Island is also another weird one. The film goes out of its way to reassure the audience that the kids are only drinking root beer, which kind of defeats the point of Pleasure Island. The kids are meant to be doing taboo things like smoking and drinking, and that's why they end up getting punished for it.
You boys have had your fun. Now pay for it.
It really feels like that this was originally going to be regular beer, as the way the kids shout about it being root beer in the background makes it feel like it was added in post-production. Like, you see that fully functioning bar in the background. Is that also meant to be filled with root beer Disney? Also, I love the fact that Disney is concerned about kids drinking beer, yet is more than happy for them to be launching fireworks at each other. Pinocchio also doesn't do anything bad on Pleasure Island, so it makes no sense as to why he's getting turned into a donkey. In the original, he's smoking and drinking and presumably doing all the other bad shit, but here he still seems to have a moral compass. Which only further leads me to believe that this was indeed meant to originally be alcohol, as it's the only thing he seemingly does that is considered wrong. But we've got to remember also, Pinocchio didn't even want to go to Pleasure Island in the first place. Here he is captured off the streets, and when he asks to go home, he's threatened by a discount Johnny Depp and the other kids with a really weird song about peer pressure. So you can't even blame him for going there in the first place. Oh, and also, we can now apparently say bollocks in a kids movie.
Bollocks.
Maybe I'm just overthinking this one, but isn't bollocks a pretty taboo word to say? Like if I had said it in school, I would have been punished. If I had said it around the dinner table as a kid, I'd definitely have gotten clipped around the ear. Yeah, my childhood was great. Maybe it's just a UK thing, but on the swear scale, I'd probably put bollocks just below the level of saying shit. Unless, of course, in America, bollocks doesn't carry as much weight there as it does in the UK. I don't know. Perhaps you guys can give me your thoughts of that one in the comment section. Another weird creative choice is that in this version, Pinocchio actually reaches Geppetto before he gets swallowed by the whale. This doesn't seem like a big change, but it really is. In the original, Pinocchio is aware that Geppetto has been swallowed by a giant whale and still decides to go and save him, even with Jiminy, his conscience, warning him not to do so. This highlights Pinocchio's bravery and unselfishness, willing to put himself in danger to save someone he loves. In this one where Pinocchio is swallowed alongside Geppetto, that kinda gets taken away. There's even the rescue scene where Pinocchio spins his feet to propel them through the water. This is dumb for a couple of reasons. First is that it takes away the tension from the chase. In the original, Pinocchio and Geppetto are struggling to paddle through the water, whilst Monstro is just simply crashing through it. It really creates a massive imbalance of power and makes Monstro such a more serious threat. Secondly, is that it kind of shows that Pinocchio being a puppet is much better for him, as if he were a real boy they would have no doubt perished, and the film even states this.
No real boy could ever do such a thing.
But then they seem to go for the most radical change, and that's not even having Pinocchio change into a boy at the end. And I thought, oh hey, now that's actually really interesting. Rather than having Pinocchio transform into a physical real boy, it kind of hints that the real change comes from within, and all those traits you once thought were a weakness can now be played into your strengths. Hey, that's actually a pretty cool take on the original, and wow, I actually respect them for taking the more mature and realistic outcome. Oh wait, no, he's changing anyway. Never mind.
People say he was transformed into an honest-to-goodness real boy. Did that actually happen? Who knows?
What do you mean you don't know? You're the one telling the story. Do you not go back with them to find out? Here they are even showing him starting to transform on screen. So why are you doing this whole, ooh, did he, didn't he? Who knows? Was this again a last minute change they made in post-production? Alright, but out of all the stupid creative choices the film attempted, this for me is the worst one. And that's the hinting at Geppetto's tragic backstory. In this version, it is strongly hinted that Geppetto once had a wife and a son, and for whatever reason they passed away, and this is why Geppetto refuses to sell his clocks.
I made them for my beloved Costanza, and she loved every one of them.
And why he's even making Pinocchio in the first place.
Well, I think he looks very much like him. Very much.
I actually quite like this idea, and I think it could have had a lot of potential if the film didn't chicken out with it. There's a big deal made at the start with a customer wanting to buy one of Geppetto's clocks, and Geppetto refusing to because they hold a lot of sentimental value to him. So you think there would have been a big scene later in the film where Geppetto makes the painful decision to sell his clocks to go out and search for Pinocchio. But no, it all happens off screen. They even throw a line at the end of the film that says that Geppetto was initially cold towards Pinocchio at the start.
Pinocchio, when you first came to me, I might have made you think I wanted somebody else.
Yet we don't see anything like that from the film itself. If anything, he seems to be pretty overjoyed with the fact.
You are an almost real boy. We can be a family.
Wouldn't that have been a much better story to tell though? Geppetto doesn't initially take to Pinocchio. This gives Pinocchio more reason to run away and become famous in order to prove himself. Geppetto goes through the grief of losing someone yet again, but this time decides that he won't wallow in self-pity and actually goes out to get Pinocchio, even if that means having to let go of the past.
Let the past die.
But no, Disney probably got scared off of that aspect, so instead just decides to play it safe. Nice. Good job. Okay, so these are other little bits that annoyed me, but I couldn't really work them into the script. They tried to show how Pinocchio got his name, but it's done in such a dumb way. I kid you not, Geppetto was like, oh, he's made out of pine. Pinocchio. Pinocchio.
I made you out of pine. Pinocchio. Pine. Pinocchio. What? Pinocchio.
Like, what? Disney really needs to stop trying to give character names backstories. I don't know if I like the seagull voice.
Well, I wouldn't want that on my conscience. Okay, Mr. Right or Wrong.
Sounds like she needs to clear her throat or something. Christ, almost sounds worse than late season's Marge Simpson.
If that jerk didn't like your sports notions, listen to someone else. The internet's full of homemade sports shows.
Wait, I thought the fairy appearing meant that time had slowed down. So why is Jiminy moving as normal?
I consider myself a bug of high moral standards, no matter what you may have heard.
What may we have heard? We gonna dive into that a little more? Nope. Okay. I like how they at least try to give Jiminy more of a reason to be a conscience.
I see a lost soul, an insect of no fixed address, an aimless vagabond.
Whereas in the original, he just did it because he was horny. Oh wait, I guess he still is here. Geppetto letting Pinocchio go to school on his own is still really dumb. Yeah, I know this happens in the original, but it's made even worse here. Firstly, because we know Geppetto is grieving, he seems to be struggling to let Pinocchio go, and is clearly concerned that Pinocchio might get lost.
This town can be very confusing. There are many curving streets, so pay attention.
So why is he letting him go alone? At least in the original, he just seemed plain ignorant to the dangers. Also, there's literally a line of kids with a supervisor that he talks to just beforehand. So why not just flag her down and ask her to wait for a little bit, so Pinocchio can then at least walk with the other kids? So this dainty little puppet just managed to get the floorboard loose? I don't think that's how physics work. Wait, did she just have this all set up and waiting? Where did this set piece even come from? Also, I don't think she could be making the puppet move like this, or giving it the moving facial expressions. Is this just meant for us to see how Pinocchio is seeing this puppet? It doesn't really make much sense as to why Stromboli would suddenly lock up Pinocchio. In the original, it's because Pinocchio was about to head back home, but here it's because he's talking to the puppet next door. Pinocchio clearly had no desire to leave, so why are you imprisoning him? If anything, you should take advantage of the fact that he's so infatuated with this puppet and use it as an incentive for him to stay. Yeah, that kid's probably dead. I love the dramatic music for this. Seagull says that she can't lift Pinocchio because he's too heavy. Then I'm pretty sure that she also wouldn't be able to water ski him along the ocean. That's not how physics work.
I was taken to Pleasure Island, where I learned to drink, I forget what they called it.
Root beer. Gotta remember that it's just root beer.
I think he's beginning to get irritated by the smoke.
It must be tickling his nose.
It's almost like Pinocchio didn't even know why he wanted to light the fire in the first place. In the original, he at least states that he was planning on making the world sneeze.
Getting out? But how?
We'll make him sneeze.
Let him sneeze.
Makes me wonder why he didn't just do this earlier. In the original, it's Pinocchio that supposedly dies, and I think this was the correct decision as it shows Pinocchio made the ultimate sacrifice to save everyone.
Oh, I had the strangest dream. I dreamt that we had all been swallowed by a whale.
Yeah, you don't think that's why you're all laying on a beach?
Do you know the way?
We'll follow that light.
Yeah, so in my head I'm assuming this is a symbol for the afterlife and that canonically they all die to Monstro. Also, it just has to be done.
Do you know the way?
Why does it close with the book when it never opened with the book? In the original they did. It kind of also annoyed me in the sense that it spoiled one of the unique things that made the original Pinocchio, and that's that all the villains get off scot-free. Yeah, in the original Pinocchio, none of the bad guys face repercussions. The cat and the fox are still conning on the streets, the Pleasure Island guy is still running his donkey business, and Stromboli is still travelling with his puppet show. I always quite like this as it drives the message home that these threats are still out there, and the only way to avoid them is to follow the rules. Having him arrested in a throwaway line of dialogue, it just kind of ruins that. So yeah, in conclusion, this is just another typical live action remake. It doesn't offer us anything better, nor anything different. Just another easy cash grab farted out by Mickey's arse. Not offensively bad, but doesn't really have a need to exist. If all you care about is scene sync in CG as opposed to 2D, then yeah, you'll probably like this. If however you're someone that's looking for character, emotion, and good quality animation, then I would say skip the live action and just watch the original.